Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the Russian media. How far can they go in covering the challenge to the Kremlin?
A reality show about American Muslims is sparking controversy.
The reality of trying to make a reality TV show about being Muslim in America. Critics of the Assad government in Syria. One wins an award, another faces charges. And who says Russians ain't got rhythm? Our web video of the week. 2011 may well be remembered as the year of the street protest. A contagion of discontent that started in the Arab world and spread to Wall Street has now infected Russia. The biggest political demonstrations the country has seen since the fall of the Soviet Union have tested the limits of Russian journalistic freedoms. It's early days yet, but one prominent blogger has been jailed. Multiple news websites and social networks have faced coordinated attacks, and the editor of a prominent news magazine has been fired. The Russia of the Putin-Medvedev era has not been a good place for the news media, but speech on the internet has been harder to control, and the discussions in Russian cyberspace appear to be having an impact on mainstream media. Our starting point this week is Moscow. The allegations of a rigged parliamentary election and the coverage of that story on Russian TV screens, in the papers, and online.
Сегодня в центре Москвы вновь было многолюдно.
There are three main TV channels in Russia, and they all broadly adhere to what the Kremlin wants them to do.
The fact that these demonstrations have been covered on state TV is a bit of a breakthrough.
Сегодня в ряде регионов России прошли митинги.
Russian state TV was in a very difficult position. The discontent became just too large. They could no longer ignore it.
That is not to say that they didn't try.
On the 5th of December and the 6th of December, there were quite big protests in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, but there were also a large number of arrests. Now, there was nothing, almost nothing, on state television about this. None of the main news bulletins covered anything about it. One leading TV critic said it was the biggest total blackout of news that she could recall.
Once state TV concluded there was just no escaping this story, the question became how to cover protesters who accuse your bosses at the Kremlin of stealing the election for the United Russia Party.
Итогом парламентских выборов.
So initially, they covered the story their way.
On Monday, a very spontaneous protest broke out at the biggest state TV channel. They showed a rally by the Kremlin youth group. The coverage ran along the line of huge demonstrations happening in central Moscow. People are cheering the victory of United Russia.
Митингующие поддержали партию «Единая Россия», а также политику руководства страны.
And it just was too obvious because everybody has internet now. It cannot go on this Soviet-style brainwashing. So they had to cover the Saturday's protests, and they did. And they did mention that these were actual protests, not cheerful demonstrations of happy people.
Кто называет телевизор зомбоящиком? Таких здесь большинство?
One of the speakers that journalists covered at that Saturday protest is a journalist turned hardcore media critic.
TV journalist Leonid Parfyonov is a very interesting figure in Russian life. 2010, he made this bombshell speech at this TV dinner where he was essentially lambasting his colleagues for being craven and acting not as journalists should do, but as propagandists for the Putin regime.
Для корреспондента федерального телеканала высшие должностные лица не ньюсмейкеры, а начальники его начальника. Институционально корреспондент тогда и не журналист вовсе, а чиновник, следующей логике служения и подчинения.
And it was very interesting to see that he was one of the speakers at the protest.
And really the speech that he made on that day was, I think, a really wonderful speech. It was full of passion, and he kind of urged people to really sort of take a really active position in putting pressure on politicians to bring about change in the media, to demand that opposition politicians actually get a fair slice of the airtime. He said that 50% of the people had voted against United Russia in the elections, and they should demand this kind of airtime for people who have an alternative opinion to express.
One of the rallying cries against this regime is not just about fraud, it's about having honest television, having fair television that reports people's opinion and has a plurality of views. And so far, under Putin, we've had Putin for 12 years, TV hasn't done that at all. It's been a kind of propaganda arm of the regime.
The Kremlin's media policy focuses primarily on television. It was quick to bring that under Vladimir Putin's control. The government has been much more tolerant of what goes into print. However, one magazine, Kommersant Vlast, went too far on this story, and as a result, 2 senior editors were fired.
It was over a picture of a spoiled ballot. The picture shows a ballot with a box ticked for the only real Liberal Party on the list. And it said a very crude insult to Putin, basically putting off.
The decision to fire these executives would have come from the top. Now, the guy who's choreographing all this, who's the sort of postmodern evil genius, if you like, or dark genius, but behind the way the Kremlin uses the media is someone called Vladislav Surkov, who is the chief of staff for Putin. He's an ex-PR man himself, and I suspect, I can't prove, that he picked up the phone to Alisher Usmanov and said, what the hell is going on? Get rid of these guys. And Usmanov, like all loyal oligarchs in Russia, knew that when you get an order from the top, you have to sweep the people away.
Alternative Russian voices in the new media space have been growing in number and influence. They too have been paying a price for speaking out. Alexei Navalny is Russia's best-known political blogger. He has far-right views, urged his followers to vote for any party other than United Russia, and was imprisoned after the first of the protests. Navalny's blog and many others critical of the government have been the targets of multiple cyber attacks. Golos, an election monitoring organization funded by the United States, has had its site knocked out of commission repeatedly.
The main reason for attacking our resources is just to stop the information about election violations that were presented before the election day. But who's behind it and who paid for that, and was it private initiative or initiative of some political group or some party, we don't know.
But I think that the actions of these people who attacked these websites had probably a counterproductive effect. And I think it may have played a part then in actually generating the kind of mood within the online community which then resulted in the protest.
Golos has also received an unusual amount of scrutiny by state-run channel NTV. NTV ran an entire documentary on the organization that was critical of its work and its source of funding. How far these protests go and what they will achieve politically is, at this early stage, anyone's guess. But what is changing in Russia, whether the Kremlin realizes it or not, whether the Kremlin likes it or not, is the way that people are getting their information.
The most important feature for this election period was the decline of influence of state television, because most of people who are now protesting are getting their information not from main TV channels. They just don't watch TV.
More and more young Russians are just turning state TV off. It's just, they regard it as a fairy tale for idiots, basically, a big shiny lie. And instead, they're getting their news from the internet, from blogs, from LiveJournal, from Twitter, and so on, and have been posting and uploading mobile footage of election fraud.
What's happening on Russian TV now, this model is unsustainable. You just cannot tell people what you think they'll believe, and they'll just, swallow it. No, they won't. I think that's the biggest achievement of the last weeks. That people are taking everything the state says with a real handful of salt.
12 years into the Putin era, that's how Russians are consuming their media, with a handful of salt and a side order of digital technology. Our Global Village Voice is now on the coverage of the story in Russia.
The internet played a significant role during Russian elections. The most important thing about the internet is that in reality, where media is controlled by government, the internet was able to provide independent source of information. As consequences, people who were following TV and people who were following internet lived in one physical space, but two different countries.
Russian bloggers have played a key role in the way the country's current unrest has unfolded. The most prominent digital activist has without a doubt been Alexei Navalny, who is responsible for popularizing the phrase "party of crooks and thieves," which is used to describe Russia's ruling party. By the time of the Duma elections on December 4th, a Levada Center poll showed that 62% of all Russians had heard of Navalny's phrase, and nearly half of them agreed that United Russia was indeed a party of crooks and thieves.
We're always looking for new faces on our broadcast. If you'd like to share your thoughts on the news media as one of our Global Village voices, you can connect with us on Facebook and Twitter, where we'll let you know what stories we're working on. Or you can just get in touch with us via email. We're at listeningpost@aljazeera.com. And don't forget our free video podcast on iTunes. Just go looking for the Listening Post Al Jazeera English, and you'll find us there. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. Last week, we told you that Syrian cyber activist Razan Ghazawi had been taken into custody while on her way to Jordan. She's since been charged. According to Amnesty International, those charges include establishing an organization that aims to change the social entity of the state and conveying news that could debilitate the morale of the nation. Ghazawi faces a maximum sentence of 15 years. Another prominent critic of the Assad government, the Syrian cartoonist Ali Ferzat, has been awarded this year's Press Freedom Prize. It's an annual award given by the French newspaper Le Monde and the Paris-based media freedom group Reporters Without Borders, whose Secretary General Jean-François Julliard said Ferzat's cartoons target the abuse of a desperate regime with its back to the wall. Ferzat has depicted a sweaty Bashar al-Assad running to catch a ride with the late Muammar Gaddafi and hurriedly painting railway tracks to escape an oncoming train. Ferzat has paid a price for his work, though. Back in August, he was attacked and had his hands broken by those believed to be loyal to the Assad government. The Somali militant Islamic group Al-Shabaab has launched an English-language Twitter account. What sort of impression Al-Shabaab hopes to make on Twitter is yet unclear. The initial flow of tweets from the press office has ranged from taunting Kenyan soldiers to discussing the movement's objectives with journalists. This is all part of a trend. 7 months ago, the Taliban started tweeting in Afghanistan and found itself debating a U.S. military spokesman there on Twitter. How long all of this lasts, though, is anybody's guess. Last month, some members of the U.S. Congress urged Twitter to stop hosting the Taliban. Presumably, the same complaints will be made over the Al-Shabaab account. An American citizen has been jailed in Thailand for taking a book critical of the country's king and posting it online. Joe Gordon, a used car salesman from Colorado, was jailed under the lèse majesté law, which prohibits anyone from insulting the Thai monarch. Gordon pleaded guilty to translating parts of an unauthorized biography, The King Never Smiles, and posting them on a blog while he was living in the U.S. Gordon was born in Thailand and was arrested back in May when he went to Bangkok to receive medical treatment. Critics have accused the Thai government of using the lèse majesté law to suppress freedom of expression. Media watch groups say there are at least 4 media workers in jail or awaiting sentence on similar charges. Chelsea Clinton, daughter of U.S. Secretary of State Hillary and former President Bill, may end up outdoing both her parents in terms of television FaceTime. She's made her debut on NBC News.
Thank you, Brian. I'm very happy to be here.
When the network hired Clinton last month to do human interest stories, which is an odd term when you think about it.
This is NBC News.
The network was accused of an unimaginative publicity stunt. Now that she's actually appeared on the air, the reviews haven't been great. The Washington Post said either we're spoiled by TV's unlimited population of giant personalities, or this woman is one of the most boring people of her era. It was created not just to attract viewers, but to foster ties between Muslims and mainstream America. However, the new reality TV show, All American Muslim, was never going to get on the air without attracting some controversy. The series focuses on the everyday lives of 5 Muslim families in Dearborn, Michigan, a city with a sizable Arab population. But the show opened a can of worms after one company withdrew its advertising upon feeling the pressure from the American right wing, which suggested that All American Muslim is part of a stealth holy war. The Listening Post's Marcela Pizarro now on the reality TV show that's challenging Muslim stereotypes in America.
Welcome to Dearborn.
I do what I have to do to make it in this world.
I don't give a what you do today. I'm looking at you to see if you deserve to play or not.
You have concerns with me converting to Islam, correct?
Yes.
These are the characters at the heart of America's new reality TV show, All American Muslim. The show is up against big reality franchises like The Kardashians and The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Unlike those other shows, All American Muslim tries to make a virtue of how very ordinary these families are.
We're not what the media's portrayed all Muslims to be. We're actually, fun-loving people. We're involved in our community. We're a mix of everything. have your conservative, you have your liberal, you have your people who are right-wing, left-wing.
These have to go up on that wall.
And we like to barbecue on Sundays, 4th of July barbecue. That's us. You know, we're your typical, family.
I think All-American Muslim is one of those possibilities realized of the traditional sort of fly-on-the-wall documentary being brought into mainstream television. You are showing ordinary life. You are showing the banality of life.
I'm asking you a question. Did you spray him? What did I tell you about telling the truth?
In an area that some of the viewers would initially believe to be other, you expose what might seem to be strange and foreign as being rather ordinary.
Because I want to have the baby at 38 weeks.
I mean, what do you do? Like, you send them an email or something?
And what could be more ordinary than a couple preparing for the birth of their first child, the day-to-day toils of bringing up children, or the step-by-step process of planning a wedding? This is the story of a small community that, apart from its religion, is utterly nondescript.
I agreed to do All-American Muslim because I felt that it was about time that we had the opportunity to share our stories and our own voice as opposed to having someone else tell our stories for us.
It has been said that while most of the world's Muslims are not terrorists, most of the world's terrorists are Muslims.
Since 9/11, the story of Muslim America has been mostly told through the news media, and Muslims have complained about stereotyping and fear-mongering.
Over 55 homegrown terrorists have been arrested in the United States, all Muslim.
They ought to have to prove something to us because they're not the most inclusive group in the world.
And now, one retail giant has sparked controversy by pulling its advertising after being pressured by a conservative Christian group, which said, All-American Muslim is propaganda clearly designed to counter legitimate and present-day concerns about many Muslims who are advancing Islamic fundamentalism and Sharia law.
A lot of anger spreading online and offline over that company's decision to pull all of its ads from the show All-American Muslim after some pressure from a conservative evangelical group.
I hope, these advertisers come to their senses, because this is shameful. Because this happened before to gays and lesbians and African Americans. I mean, this has happened again and again.
We believe that this show is propaganda, and we've called on advertisers across the country to pull in.
But that's what we're seeing right now is this knee-jerk reactionary response to this benign, harmless show by the Islamophobia Network.
Realize that, yes, there are misconceptions that are out there.
US TV networks are risk-averse and have been hesitant to deal with the subject of Muslim Americans on primetime TV. Their cautious approach to a Canadian comedy called Little Mosque on the Prairie is a case in point. That show, about Christians and Muslims trying to get along, was a hit in Canada.
American Idol, Canadian Idol. I say all idols must be smashed.
There was interest in the US market. Fox even bought the rights, but never put it on the air.
Desperate housewives. Why should they be desperate when they're only performing their natural womanly duties?
I think that the American audience is ready for a show like Little Mosque on the Prairie. I think that the American buyers are nervous about it, and I understand why they're nervous about it. 9/11 didn't happen in Toronto, it happened in New York. I don't think the obstacles are as great as one thinks they are. It's just a brave person saying, let's try that.
So you actually designed it?
Yeah.
All-American Muslim may be designed to change the thinking of non-Muslims in the US, but there are sections within the Islamic community who are uneasy with the portrayals.
I'm not wearing a hijab and I'm a strong woman, so people don't know how to really take me.
What we've seen already with this show is so many Muslims are calling in saying, oh, one of the characters, she wears tight clothes and she wants to start a nightclub. That's not a perfect Muslim. And again, you see this need to show an avatar of perfection so that the mainstream will accept us and like us. And if, God forbid, you air dirty laundry, then you create a lot of chaos.
People feel that, perhaps Dearborn isn't the complete representation of what the diversity of the Muslim community is. And that's understandable. This is an opportunity for us to begin with that stepping stone, to move forward in a small way to engage communities.
Why are so many so feared, so misunderstood?
The rough ride that All American Muslim has had so far
I oppose the show for a lot of reasons.
is evidence that 10 years after 9/11, this issue is still a challenge for mainstream media in the US to deal with.
But can you be a good Muslim and a good American?
No, I do not believe you can.
Really?
But those working to improve relations think it's worth it.
Hopefully people learn the following: Muslims are human beings. They're not stereotypes, taxi cab drivers, terrorists, or wannabe terrorists. You know, they're your neighbors, they're your teachers, they're people who work in the police station, they're people who are football coaches. There's nothing really novel about this. But again, when 62% of Americans don't know a Muslim and their only reality of Muslim was Osama bin Laden, this is revelatory.
A reality show about American Muslims is sparking controversy.
The show has been controversial.
It's stirring up emotions on both sides.
But evangelicals and Islamophobes might want to think twice before creating too much uproar.
But what's followed is a racially charged controversy.
Because they're doing the producers a big favor.
There was a public outcry, a firestorm of criticism from celebrities.
Giving them the publicity money cannot buy.
It seems to just show Muslims living their lives like the rest of us idiots.
More Global Village Voices now on All American Muslim and its place in the U.S. media.
I unfortunately wasn't surprised to see the conservative reaction to All American Muslim. But I was heartened to see that the general media consensus is that Lowe's decision to pull those ads was an awfully bad one. I also imagine that this will inspire more people to tune in to All American Muslim, where they'll see that Muslims in America are pretty much like other Americans in America. Normal. To the point of being a little bit boring sometimes.
Muslim practice is not monolithic. Muslims practice their religion in different ways, and I think the show's done a really good job of showing how Muslim communities negotiate that heterogeneity in practice.
I'm not surprised at the reaction the show All American Muslims receive from right-leaning groups here in the US. The pressure is coming from internet hate sites like Bare Naked Islam, or from right-wing groups such as the Florida Family Association, who wish to terrorize or marginalize minorities in the name of racial, cultural, or religious superiority.
Finally, our web video of the week takes us to the heart of Red Square. Russia has got a rich history of political satire, but it's gone through a bit of a dormant period since Vladimir Putin came to power. One of Russia's tightly controlled state TV outlets, Channel 1, decided that last year's New Year's Eve would be a good time to gently poke some fun at its ruling duo. The result, Prime Minister Putin and President Medvedev in a cartoon reviewing some of the highlights of 2010. Now, we'll be keeping a close eye out for this year's version of the cartoon to see if Putin and Medvedev emerge from Russia's winter of political discontent with their senses of humor intact. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
Ну, как говорится, поехали. Опа!
Мы с коллегой вдвоем вновь куплеты вам споем.
Должен согласиться я, прижилась традиция. Оп.
Замечательно. Нормально. Стало лучше жить в России, где мы вдруг не появись, всюду хлеб по 7 копеек.
И дороги, зашибись.
Оп, оп, оп.
Ну вы раскочегарились, Владимир Владимирович.
Настроение новогоднее.
Понял. Опа, папа.
Хорошо.
Спасибо. Я послушал Элтон Джона, а еще встречался с Боно.
Это, знаешь, не предел. Я тут сам играл и пел.
Проведем турнир футбольный через 8 лет уже.
Весь Саранск теперь довольный. Лондон же в глубокой...
депрессии, Владимир Владимирович.
А, ну да.
По-моему, жжем.
Согласен.
Вот летит по небу глаз, называется ГЛОНАСС.
Вот его бы как-нибудь на Европу натянуть.
Сильно сказано, Владимир Владимирович.
Стараемся, Дмитрий Анатольевич.
Ух!
Отлично.
Мы б еще куплеты спели. Но и забывать о деле нам, увы, никак нельзя. С Новым годом вас, друзья! Опа!